for our talks, last couple of talks, of doing some things. So I thought that I would reintroduce it. So we'll begin tonight with our land acknowledgement. And so we acknowledge the traditional lands on which we reside. This is Treaty 6 territory. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Nehayao, the Cree, the Dene, the Anishinaabe, the Saulteaux, Nakota Isaka, Nakota Sioux, Niitsitapi, and the Blackfoot peoples. And we acknowledge that this is Métis homeland and home of one of the largest communities of the Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It's a welcoming place for all peoples to come from around the world to share Edmonton as a home. Together we call upon our collective honored traditions and spirits to work in building a great community for today and future generations. Wonderful. So we'll go around the screen, the Brady Bunch screen here, and first say a very warm welcome to Domyo. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And Gyoke, thank you. Kathy, Sean and Cher, Marlon and Joe, Hector, Jenna, Randall, and we're joined tonight by Nikki. Welcome, Nikki, to the community, to the group, and thanks very much for joining us. Couple things before we get started, just by way of announcements, and then we'll get going. Saturday is the last in-person sit for 2021. I haven't set anything up yet for the new year for a couple of reasons. As you know, COVID cases are on the uptick. And so it's a little bit concerning. So we're just watching that a little bit. The next week or two, I think, will be give us some signs of where things are at. So, but we will do the in-person sit this coming Saturday. If you have not booked your seats, please book your seats if you're going to be here. And we'll go out with a bang. This Sunday is I think we may do a simple sit on Sunday. I might ask one of you to lead that. I unfortunately have to jet out for something on Sundays, but we'll work that out. Then next Tuesday, drum roll please, the most exciting meeting that has ever taken place in the history of the planet. So we'll do our foundational meeting. I have not yet got the certificate of incorporation back from Health Service Alberta yet. I'm hoping that it won't be too long, but I figured we might as well get going. The people that responded to the poll said that next Tuesday seemed to be the first of two best dates. So next week we'll elect officers for the 2022 year, talk about bank accounts, talk about bylaws and constitutions, and the fun never stops on those foundational meetings. So please consider, for those of you that are in Alberta. Unfortunately, for those of you that don't reside in Alberta, you won't be able to officially serve on the board just because of the way that the statute is written, but you can be members of the community. For those of you in Alberta, please give a thought to perhaps filling an officer position or a committee position, because there's going to be a few of those. I will not be, Marlon, yeah, there you go. I will not be serving as chair or vice chair. I'm happy to let my name stand as a secretary, treasurer, or board member or something. So one of all y'all are going to have to step up to be the chair, and another person's going to have to step up to be the vice chair. So I'll let folks decide that. And then practice is going to be a little bit probably sporadic after next Tuesday. What I'm thinking is I might set up a regular morning and maybe evening sit throughout the Christmas break. And then we hit January. There's a lot going on. Big announcement. I'm loaded on a practice period for Upaya for January, or for a good portion of January, to continue the wonderful training that Gyoke has started, and and I'll be learning from some folks at Upaya. So that is going to put a bit of a wrench into some things. So we'll have to coordinate some discussions. It is not in person, just so you know. I will still actually be here. Unfortunately, they're running a online practice period. I cannot get to Upaya for many reasons, but yeah. So just to let you know, I will be around, but I'll be doing 15 hours a day worth of Zen stuff. So I won't be able to do a lot of the stuff that I've usually been doing. Randall asked the question: as a non-Canadian, can I still attend the meeting Tuesday? Please do. Please do. You're most welcome. So we'll work something out, and then that's the big announcement. Gyoke, did you have any announcements or anything that you wanted to raise just before we get started here?
Other than the fact that you're going to be the Dharma brother of Dave Cuomo?
So I will be in California for one day on February the 13th to go to Sozenji for the official registration. I guess, yeah. So Dave Cuomo from Angel City is also going to be going through the ceremony, I guess, too. So that's another tie between Angel City and Rocky Mountain and Sozenji. So who knew that it was going to happen? But it's pretty crazy. So yeah, it's wonderful. Hopefully, Dave will be able to join us too. So
Before I go, I just have to tell Domyo, we'll have to go out again. I have to say this. Okay. Thank you.
yeah. So okay. Well, without further ado, so that's another tie between Angel City and Rocky Mountain and Sozenji. So my YouTube just kicked in. Okay, so I talked to Domyo ahead of time, and she asked if I would lead the opening verse. So great. The unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. All right, this evening we have the good fortune to be joined by Domyo Burk. And Domyo studied and worked as a wildlife biologist before beginning Zen practice at Dharma in 1996. She spent 5 years practicing intensively as a layperson and then was ordained as a monk in 2001 by Roshi Carlson. The first 7 years of Domyo's monastic training were spent full-time residential practice at Dharma Zen Center, except for a practice period at Tassajara in California, and time practicing at Great Vow in Oregon. On October the 18th, 2010, Domyo received Dharma transmission from Roshi Carlson, and she's a full-time staff member at Dharma Zen Center for 11 years. She was on the SCBA board, I believe, or is a member, and was on the SCBA board from 2007 to 2013, and administrative coordinator of the SCBA from 2013 until May 2016. She's the head teacher at Brightway Zen in Oregon, and I had the good fortune of receiving the precepts from Domyo this spring in Jukai. So, Domyo, it's a great pleasure, and I turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Okay, good. Just so you know, if I end up looking at all distracted, it's because I'm at my Zen center, and in a half an hour, our program will begin. And I think they all know, I think, that I'm back here and they're not going to disturb me, but who knows? So, yeah, welcome. So let's see. I corresponded a little bit with Aaron. What is your name now?
Rugen.
Yeah. Rugen.
Yeah.
Meaning?
It is unclouded source. Nice. Right, you okay?
Yeah. Unclouded source. Great. So anyway, we corresponded a little bit, and he mentioned something about there's been discussion and interest around birth and death and emptiness and all those rich topics. And I just happened this last the Sunday before Rohatsu here at Brightway, we did a Q&A, and a couple of the questions were really about that. So I figured I would develop a little further what I shared with them. So essentially, this talk is, where's the meaning if we have no soul? So the gist of it is that Zen agrees with the Buddha's teachings that consciousness is simply one of the skandhas and is marked by anatta, or not self. And all skandhas, all things, all composite things, are marked by anicca, or impermanence. Nothing lasts. So not only is there no inherent enduring self-essence here during my lifetime, there's nothing that lasts that could be called me that goes on after I die. Nothing lingers. But this can seem perhaps like a bleak teaching, implying an absence of meaning and the prospect of perhaps eventual annihilation. But this is a misunderstanding of the true nature of reality, which is infused with meaning, and the true nature of self, which is boundless and utterly free from limited concepts. So first, I was going to clarify a little bit about Zen's view on self-essence, and I apologize if some of you are entirely familiar with this, but on the other hand, it's such a subtle topic that, you know, it's not like you ever feel like, yeah, I got that one sewn up. So I'm going to clarify a little bit more about Zen's view on self-essence or soul, or what happens after death, and then discuss meaning, like what is the meaning in the context of this. So sometimes when people talk about what might continue after death, consciousness, does our consciousness continue? And to be fair, there are forms of Buddhism which believe that that is so. So Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, they do believe that our consciousness goes on and it goes in a Bardo realm and it waits and it gets reborn. And Zen doesn't, I don't know, maybe there's some Zen Buddhists who believe it, but Zen doesn't teach that. Because really, our concern, if you think about it, about a consciousness or soul or something that might continue after our death is more or less a concern about our self continuing after our death. Because if somebody told you, okay, we have an energy, science hasn't proven it yet, but we do have this consciousness energy, and that after we die, just like the cells and molecules of our body go on to other things, this consciousness energy goes out into the universe and dissipates, or it kind of coheres and floats around and then gloms onto something else. I mean, I don't think that's what we're looking for. I don't think that I sense of a kind of impersonal consciousness energy that might continue is really what the primary concern of human beings is. We want there to be something. What happens to me after I die? So we say there's no enduring, independent, inherent self-nature in anything. And the teachings point us to this, but it's also something we can experience for ourselves. It isn't a philosophical and metaphysical speculation about what's out there that we prove using some kind of scientific method. Basically, we observe, once we have the tools of mindfulness and reflection and meditation, we observe what is it like to live with a belief in inherent enduring self. And then what is it like to live without that belief? And we find that the assumption of self-nature tends to be awkward and arbitrary and limiting and anxiety producing. And then when we live without that assumption, we feel free and vital, intimate, responsive, in tune with things. I thought this, a kind of analogy might be if you are in a river and you're swimming upstream, all this effort, and then you relax and then you like float along with the river. I mean, you've just had an experience of the movement of water and the water moves downhill. You have verified that through your own direct experience. You haven't like sat on the bank and observed, how water moves. You have found, wow, through my own experience, I find that when I do this, it's a struggle. When I do this, there's ease. So the beautiful thing is when we're freed from that assumption of self, we're also freed from fear. Life is very, very real, but there's no one who was born. So there's no one who can be threatened right now. No one who is going to be annihilated when we die. Now, our human nature, the tendencies that natural selection have bred into us, we have this sense of self and self-preservation, and, it has adaptive purposes. So, we can feel threatened. We're like, so that's going to arise when we face difficulty, but we can also let that go and not use that as our only way to orient toward life. So Dogen says in Genjo Koan, firewood becomes ash. Ash cannot become firewood again. However, we should not view ash as after and firewood as before. So in other words, dharmas, meaning things. So dharma, there's dharma, the teaching or truth, but there's also dharmas with a little d, which are just things. Things change and transform. They're marked by anicca and anatta. But we should not view them as being changed and transformed, as if there's some kind of essence within them that here's the Dharma beforehand, and then it goes through this transformation, and there's that essence of the Dharma in the middle of it. There's just change. The whole thing changed. So Dogen continues, we should know that firewood dwells in the Dharma position of firewood and has its own before and after. Although before and after exist, past and future are cut off. Ash stays in the position of ash with its own before and after. So in other words, the Dharma position, or the manifest truth of each being and each thing, exists in this very moment. Yes, there is causation and change, but the beauty of each manifestation is not dependent on its past or its future. So before death, there is a person with a breath and a beating heart and relationships. And after death, there is a dead person with beings mourning their loss. No thing is lost. It's just a different state of affairs. As firewood never becomes firewood again after it has burned to ash, there is no return to living after a person dies. However, in Buddha Dharma, this is Dogen again, sorry. However, in Buddha Dharma, it is an unchanged tradition not to say that life becomes death. Therefore, we call it no arising. It is the established way of Buddha's turning the Dharma wheel not to say that death becomes life. Therefore, we call it no perishing. what we as human beings really care about here is the no perishing part. Well, that's what we really care about. We want to think we have a special enduring self-essence which doesn't perish but will exist as a identifiable self-essence after we die. So we can be reborn somewhere, or at least maybe if we go back into the universe, we do so kind of consciously, right? There's still some little individual essence that enjoys joining the universal. If there is no such self-essence, if even our birth and throughout our lives there is no such self-essence, there is no such essence to die. And this may sound bleak, but I'll discuss more about why it isn't. So finally, Dogen says, life is a position in time. Death is also a position in time. This is like winter and spring. We don't think that winter becomes spring, and we don't say that spring becomes summer. So I love this analogy of the seasons, because we don't impute inherent self-nature onto the seasons. It's not a problem. We're not really that concerned with them. So that makes sense. Like, there's not something called spring, which then is sadly turns into summer, or summer sadly turns into fall. It's changing conditions. But it's different with us, right? We relate to ourselves very differently. Now, elsewhere, Dogen talks about how time is being. So there's a lot more to this. And yet, like I said, this isn't metaphysical speculation for its own sake. It's about us facing our own deepest koans as sentient beings, our fear of death and annihilation. So I think it's totally okay to remain totally agnostic about all of this. Maybe you think there's a soul or a spirit or who knows? It doesn't really matter. The most important part in Zen is really that, like, we don't want to get too stuck on that. We don't, as long as we're not overly focused on what about me? What about my self-essence after I die? Then we say that is really just a distraction and an impediment in practice. So before I go into the second part, which is where might we find meaning despite no self and emptiness, I didn't know whether there might be any questions about the Zen view of self-essence and emptiness of self-essence. And I don't know if you guys are used to using the raise hand feature, but you are very welcome to do that under the reactions button. Raise your hand and I can see you, or you could do it the old-fashioned way. There aren't that many of us. Or just unmute yourselves. Okay.
Domyo-san, thank you very much. I really appreciate your guidance. This is definitely one of those things, a lot of Japanese people read it, but then, a lot of times we let them sink, but it's don't take sort of that deep dive. So I'm really enjoying your insight. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I also I've come up with a habit now of, when I invite questions on my Zoom meetings, we just kind of sit quietly like Quakers for a while. We're Zen people, right? We can sit in silence. So we can just sit in silence for a minute or so, and if anything arises, go ahead and say it. Otherwise, we'll just absorb. right, I'm impressed. Y'all got the Zen teaching of no self. Or maybe you're just eager to find out about meaning. So, meaning. So I often, look up words in the dictionary. I was at Rahatsu last week, and Chozen Bei said she looks at the dictionary as a Dharma book. And I appreciate that. So I looked at the meaning of meaning. And we don't mean like message, like here's a word or a symbol. Now, what's the meaning of it? We mean the second definition, which is the end, purpose, or significance of something. So synonyms are intention, aim, goal, design, object, or plan. So human beings might not be unique in their need for meaning, but I'm kind of guessing that they are. I mean, who knows, right? Maybe whales and dolphins, who knows? But it kind of seems like a uniquely human hang-up, that we have this need for meaning, that we long to feel we are significant, that we're important, that we're special as individuals. We long to feel like we are part of a plan, that our life serves a purpose, that after we've lived, that we've contributed toward that purpose, somehow pushed the needle just a little further, that someone or something witnesses our life and judges it to be good enough. Someone or something with a larger view and a plan knows what's going on, even if we don't, that everything will turn out okay in the end. So where do Buddhists find meaning? If we don't take refuge in a belief in a soul, or a deity, or a heavenly afterlife, at least not one that lasts, that we particularly want to get to, or a divine plan? And this is a very good question. And we should answer this for ourselves. So it's not just a matter of like, well, I'll tell you the answer now and it'll all be over. I mean, this is really something that we need to wrestle with, each of us. So my relationship to this question, as a teenager and a young adult, I was tormented by the question, what is the meaning of life? I described it in my podcast spiritual journey. I just felt like I was getting on a conveyor belt to death. I was just like, I could just go through the motions, but kind of what was it all for? What was the deeper meaning of it? And part of course, what brought me to Zen. And partway through my practice, when I had developed the ability, not a superhuman ability, but just, you become somewhat adept at like, at least temporarily shifting the direction of your mind. Like, let me try on this thought, or let me try on this approach, or let me, so I did this experiment. I was at work and I said, what if I walk down this hallway without the question, what is the meaning of life? And when I did that, I realized like, well, this is nice. maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe like I am insisting on something that is not in harmony with the truth. So what I saw was that I was viewing my life through my own limited, self-centered frame, assuming that meaning is dependent on something external, some kind of plan or purpose or deity, something outside of the here and now, in the future, in the past, or outside this set of circumstances. What is the meaning? And instead, considering the possibility of viewing and experiencing life on its own terms. Nothing whatsoever is missing. It's not a matter of meaning or no meaning. That's like looking at your child and asking them, what are you here for? As if the preciousness of your child's existence was dependent on them fulfilling some kind of preordained plan. It seems so obvious when you put it in terms like that. What are you here for? It's like, but somehow we want to be here for something. So when we do view and experience life on its own terms, significance. So when I talked about this at my Zen Center, somebody pointed out he likes the term significance, like meaning has this kind of goal, intent, purpose. But significance carries some of the same importance, but doesn't necessarily have that same, externally defined meaning requirement. So significance is inherent in each thing, in each moment, with no need for reference to the past, future, or some external plan. And true self-nature is not voidness. It's boundless. All things are the self. As Dogen says again, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be verified by all things. And he also said, conveying oneself toward all things to carry out practice enlightenment is delusion. All things coming and carrying out practice enlightenment through the self is realization. So, and we've probably all had tastes of this at a time when we drop our self-concern, our fog of self-concern just a little bit. And then it's like we are participating in life. We're verified by life. We're surrounded by life. So the universe at this moment is one seamless reality, luminous and miraculous. And your manifestation is unique. And without it, the universe would not be what it is. You partake of, participate in this luminous reality. And you don't need to be special, as in better than anyone else, or meeting some set of expectations. You don't even need to have an enduring self-essence. That's just an idea. It always annoys me when Christians respond to some terrible occurrence by restating their conviction that God has a plan, but his plan is beyond our comprehension. That sounds to me like saying, God is like a human being, and he makes plans like human beings do. Linear plans about the future and how things should turn out. Like he scripted all of it, and somehow the suffering and torture and destruction is in the service of some kind of overall plot. But I think at a more mystical level, some Christians are saying the same things we Buddhists are, that it doesn't make sense to apply human concepts to figure out the why of the universe. If we do so, if we're looking for meaning in that limited way, we'll miss the unconditional beauty and preciousness of this existence. So essentially, though we have no enduring self-essence, it's perfectly fine. The only thing, I don't know, I mean, maybe I was being over dramatic, but when I was practicing and like contemplating, working on letting go of my sense of self, I mean, I had this sense of trepidation, like if I did so, I would just evaporate, or like I would just be in, I wouldn't be able to function, or like what would happen if I let go of this sense of self? And I asked my teacher, and she's like, the only thing that would go was that sense of self. Everything else would still be here. Your body would still function, the sun would still rise, there'd still be relationships, there'd still be challenges, there'd be all of it. The only thing that would be missing is that limiting idea. So I'll leave it there. Questions or comments? Ryugen.
I just want to say thanks. I don't usually come in and be a part of anything like this with Aaron. So as soon as you started talking about death, it's one of the most interesting concepts I find about Buddhism, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I'm interested in Buddhism. And just hearing your explanation was so simple in your I just wanted to say thank you. That's all. Thank you. It was very great listening to you. You're a very good speaker.
Thank you. And if you end up hearing some of the views from other lineages of Buddhism, it might be very confusing. I mean, Buddhism evolved within a cosmology of rebirth. So, I mean, the thing is, like, that was just assumed. The idea that we were reborn life after life was just, that's how people figured it worked. And Buddhism arose within that and just adapted itself around it. And it's not really an essential part of Buddhism. But actually, they did their best. They really, really tried. Because people immediately said, like, well, if we have no soul or essence, then how does rebirth work? So then they came up with they tried so hard. And the best, analogy I got was like, okay, so there's like a candle or a lamp, it's got a flame, and it passes the flame to the next, lamp. Is anything past? So they really tried hard to explain how can rebirth happen if there's no self. but generally speaking, like, in Zen, we generally just don't worry about it.
Lovely. That's a lovely way to think. Like, even I'm a nurse, so I take care of a lot of clients, and we always try to find so much purpose in death, right? So it's just fascinating to just kind of like let that go. Like,
well, and I think the wonderful and rewarding part comes from the realizing, like, we have this limited idea of self that began when I was born or conceived and ends when my physical body dies, and it's contained in this physical body and all that. But we challenge that idea of self. The self is boundless. I am everything. I am the food I eat and the air I breathe and the people I interact with. I am all of that. So what does all that end when my physical body dies? And in a sense, when somebody dies, they are still here in many ways. So that's where I find some solace, in that, yeah, but self isn't what we think. So, Komyo or Jenna.
First of all, thank you, Domyo, so much for this talk tonight. I love the way that you spoke of life and death. Recently, I was working with my study group on Shobogenzo Bendoa. And one of the topics in Bendoa is about life and death. And we were discussing the fact that Buddhists say there's nothing after death. There's no essence or anything. And I was very surprised because I actually welled up with emotion. And the more the study group talked about the fact that there was nothing after death, the more my emotions churned up at this. And I really had, after study group, I really had to sit with myself and say, where did that come from, and realize how invested I really was in the fact that there is an essence after we pass, and it was like a dagger to my heart that somebody was saying that's not true,
Yeah.
But I appreciate the fact, though, that I was open to listen to it and I didn't run away from it. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to run away from it and just not sit and listen to it. And I love the way that you spoke about it, which was, I think, in a far more gentler fashion than what Dogen put forth in Bendoa. He was pretty harsh about it. So
There's no return to living after a person dies.
Yes.
But I think you're right that it's, if any of us contemplate this and we think it's no big deal, we're deluding ourselves, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it is. This is the essence of, what it means to be alive and what it means to be human, and and if we don't explore those fears and really explore what our self-essence really, or what our self-nature really is, we're not going to be prepared for that real death. And just holding some idea, this hope of self-essence, I don't know is going to be enough. I mean, some people might have very strong faith, but a lot of times, right at that last moment, it's like, oh shit, I don't know. I hope so, but and none of us really know until we're faced with that. And I remember reading a story about Suzuki Roshi, and he was down at Tassajara, and I mean, he was, Suzuki Roshi, the Zen master at this point, and he almost drowned in Tassajara Creek. And he described, he was just sinking and looking up at like swimmers' legs. And he said he was shocked at how much he wanted to live. Like, he was shocked at this, like, hey, and somebody rescued him and he was fine, but like, that's, we've evolved to care about life, to seek life, to stay alive. So how does that mesh with our true nature, our boundless, self nature?
Thank you for your talk. It is very lovely to listen to you speak. I'm very shy, so please forgive me. It was very interesting to hear the perspectives. I have, I suppose, I feel conflicted because I don't really understand this idea of self. I feel like I've always been kind of like a leaf in the wind, and I've just taken life the way it's been given to me, and I don't understand what you mean by this, by the self, so much. And then funny, I was recalling a memory of when I drowned once as a child, when I was 10. And I remember being frightened and thinking, I'm gonna drown. And then I relaxed and I felt my whole body calm down. And I felt, this is it. This is how I die. And everything went black. And then there was kind of a light at the end. But then so I just felt really calm, and I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna die. I'm just gonna wait to see what happens. And then all of a sudden, my eyes were open, and I was coughing and choking up water. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting. So to me, I find it hard to I guess believe the concept that there's nothing after. I'm not quite sure if the understanding of what happens after, I think, is very misunderstood, of like almost like sorry, it would take a lot of time to go into detail about how I feel about the connection of atoms, and you know, how atoms are all kind of the same. And you know, if you look at everything, you know, without its form, everything's the same. Atoms are all the same. We're all made of the same things. And I guess to me, consciousness has to go somewhere after we die. And so I guess I just struggle with that part of Zen. But I respect that everybody believes what they believe, and that's what makes everybody pieces of a puzzle, and we form this beautiful planet together of people. And I guess that's all, that's all I wanted to share.
I thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you. You know, when you said, I'm not sure, I understand what this, like, what the view of self is and whatever. Essentially, that's kind of the point, is that if we really start to examine what we think the self is or what we hope the self is, we can't put our finger on it. Like it's just this assumption in the background. But when we explore it, it's like, where is it exactly? There's something. We're alive. We are definitely alive. My response matters. My engagement with life matters. Your engagement with life matters. So what is that? So really, it's the Zen view, I would say, is the emphasis to drop all views. Our practice should not be about views. So it's not about adopting a view, even though Dogen says there's no return to life after a person dies. You know, sometimes Dharma is just medicine. Like there's a medicine for a particular ill. Really, it's about dropping all views. So here's an example. One of my teachers, Kyogen, he was on a bus trip back in the 70s or whatever, and he was wearing his monk garb on a Greyhound bus. And this Christian sat next to him and, talked to him for the whole ride about Christ. And he said to Kyogen, he said, if I could take you back and show you that Christ died and rose from the dead, would that change your your religion, your view, your practice. And Kyogen said, no. But then, he didn't say this, but he thought later, like, what if he had asked the guy the same question? What if I took you back and showed you he didn't? What would that do to your faith? So really what we want our faith not to rely on anything like that, any belief. So if I hold too tightly to the belief that consciousness doesn't continue after death, that's not the point. Maybe it does. But our peace of mind, our liberation is not going to come from knowing that. Like the Buddha said specifically, we can't know. We cannot know that. I mean, maybe some people have had some experiences, right? But most of us have not. So we cannot verify it for ourselves. So the Buddha said, this practice is all about stuff we can verify for ourselves. So that's why it's probably best just to remain agnostic about it all. Like, I don't know. I don't know if it does or not. It's probably much more amazing and mysterious than we expect. I mean, that's just the way the universe works, right?
So if I can just build on that piece,
Yeah.
Talking about being able to verify for yourself. I mean, presumably we through our practice will be able to verify this no self idea. Right? That's something that we will be able to see or experience for ourselves, or at least I hope so. That's why I'm doing this, to try to, because I've I don't know, how will we know? Will we just know?
Yeah, well, it's like the knowing is like putting your hand in water and knowing whether it's cold or hot. It's just like, oh, it's about yourself. It's about your own experience. So you can go, oh, but it's not that we verify there's no self, because like you can't prove a negative, right? It's that we verify this thought about self is not necessary, and it's better to live more free of it. I mean, we can never entirely be free of it as a human being because it's just part of our makeup, but we can see through it. We can see that it does not reflect some kind of inherent reality. So it's through like letting go of that illusion, that assumption, that attachment. And then through our own experience, maybe just for a moment, and then we verify that this is true. Like that was completely imaginary. That was a total like dream. So sometimes it talks about like waking up, right? And it's like the drama of the self is a dream. And then you wake up and you go, wow, geez, that was just a dream. Thank goodness. So once when I was at Tassajara, we at a practice period led by Reb Anderson, and he had us. We weren't looking for the true nature of the self. We weren't looking for the emptiness of self. We were looking for our view of a self. That is what we were looking for, is our view, because that's what exists. That's the thing, which then we can hopefully see through, let go of a little bit.
Well, thank you, Domyo. I think we're at time, and
All right, look at that.
You've got something else going on. So thank you very much for for your talk and answering questions. We'll close with a quick dedication. May this merit extend universally to all, so that we, together with all beings, realize the Buddha way. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prajna paramita. Thank you again. And for everybody out there, if the part that I hate doing the most, if we don't have a whole lot of overhead, but if you feel like contributing, we have in-person sits and the Zoom license and all that fun stuff, and we do like to give the teachers that come a little bit of dineros for Dharma. So if you feel like contributing, check out the Rocky Mountain Zen website and click on support RMZ, and we'll go from there. Thank you again, Domyo, very much.
Pleasure to be with all of you.
And thanks everybody for joining tonight. And we will see you on Saturday, hopefully, everybody. Okay. Have a good night.
Night.